This is the productivity tips for Java, EE, and Spring developers. We're going to start with a story about productivity and a little bit about how we go about our own thinking. The story is about 5 monkeys, a ladder, and some bananas. Who's heard this story? A couple of people. It's probably not real. Probably never happened, but it's quite funny. So what happened was we started off with a ladder with some bananas at the top of the ladder and 5 of these little monkey dudes. And the obvious thing happened. This was supposedly some scientific experimentation. What happened was the monkeys tried to go up the ladder to get these bananas. So what happened? Well, when they tried to get the bananas, all the monkeys are sprayed with cold water. Okay, so we're trying to make sure that these monkeys learn not to go and get these bananas because there will be repercussions. So the monkeys actually, rather than try and get the bananas, they actually fight. So if one monkey tries to go up and get the bananas, the other monkeys will beat the crap out of this poor monkey so that they all don't get sprayed. Because when one monkey goes up, all the monkeys get sprayed. So what they effectively do is they self-police, okay? They learn that they shouldn't get the bananas. They learn that if they try to get the bananas, they'll all be sprayed, and they learn to self-police so that if one monkey tries to get the bananas, all the other monkeys will stop them. Then what happened, down here, this little monkey, all these monkeys here, these are conditioned monkeys. This monkey here is a new monkey. He doesn't know the rules. So this monkey sees the bananas at the top of the ladder. He does the first straight thing, and when he tries to get the bananas, all the other monkeys try and beat the crap out of this poor monkey because he doesn't know the rules. Then they replace another monkey and another monkey till all the monkeys are non-conditioned monkeys. They don't understand why they can't get the bananas, but they are self-policing. So all these monkeys will not go up to the top of the ladder to get the bananas. None of them know what will happen if they do, but they will police themselves so that no one will get the bananas. This is a classic example of people doing things, or monkeys doing things, because that's the way things are done. They're not questioning why they are doing something. They're doing it because that's the way. And this is why when you join a new team, people always say, question everything. Make sure we're doing things for the right reasons. And this is a great way of how we can look at productivity, which I'll talk about in a second. So a little bit about me. I work for Zero Turnaround as a developer advocate. Who's heard of the the virtual jug? Only a couple of people. The virtual jug was something I created about 3 years ago. We have over 11,000 members, and we're an online-only Java user group. So we get presentations from all the best speakers around the world, and we effectively just stream it live on the internet. Free to join, so feel free to come along and do that. I'm also one of the co-leaders of the London Jug, and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. But my day job is a developer advocate for Zero Turnaround, a company that works on productivity tools, which we'll look at a little bit in this session. But this is the reason that I'm passionate about productivity. So what is productivity? This is an interesting one. When we think of productivity, we just think, well, we have something that's not going particularly fast, we want to speed it up. Well, that's great, but there's actually more to productivity than that. There are 3 pieces of productivity that I've put together. The first one is removing non-essential tasks, very much similar to the monkey scenario. We're doing things because that's the way we do it, and it's more a routine than us actually asking ourselves, do I still need to do this? So the second thing is optimizing existing tasks. So yes, sometimes we have to do things, but can we do it in a faster way? Can we achieve the same goal, but by doing something faster? For example, over the last 10 years or so, I've increased my smiley effectiveness by 33% by removing the nose. The third option is retaining important tasks. This is key because one of the key things is speed is not our goal. Speed is not our goal. Our actual goal, what we are trying to achieve from a project, is our goal. By speeding up our route to the goal is great, but we don't want to lose sight of what our goal is. Speed is not our goal. Speed just helps us reach our goal faster. That's a very important part. And when we look at productivity tools, there are a bunch of productivity tools out there. I'm just going to show you a few for Java EE and Spring use. But do try and make time to look at productivity tooling and trial productivity tooling, because it really is a very fast thing that you can look at, and something that can be very impactful over the longer term. Who agrees slides are boring? Yeah, quite a few people. Who thinks this is better? Some experimentation, yeah? You want to see some live coding? Awesome. Okay, let's do some live coding. Okay, I'm going to start with something called JBoss Forge. Who's heard of JBoss Forge before? Not many people. Okay, so JBoss Forge. With JBoss Forge, is my font size okay for people at the back? All good, excellent. So JBoss Forge is a console, a tool that allows you to create applications writing very, very little code. A lot of the artifacts and files surrounding existing applications, like Java EE applications, they're very boilerplate. They can actually be self-generated very, very easily. So that's what JBoss Forge does. It allows you to rapidly create an application without writing a huge amount of code. And in fact, it's just a console, so I can actually, let me just check. Yeah, I think I am using Java 8. There we are, good. So we enter the console, and we get a command prompt. This is just a regular console. I can type things like ls. I can type things like oops, I can't type that. PWD. Interestingly, it does help people like me who have typing disabilities. If I hit tab, I have a list of commands that I can actually use. Some of these are very console-like commands, like make directory, move, more, ls, less. Others are specific to the Forge console. So for example, if I wanted to create a project, I can call project new. Let's do that now. So I'm going to create project new. If I hit tab after that, it will give me options which I can actually use for this command. So the options in green, so if I hit tab at the top, oops, the options in green are the ones that I absolutely need to use. So I'm going to hit named, and what am I going to call my project? Let's call my project JBCN as something that's very, very obvious. I can also do things like set the build system. In this case, it only gives me the Maven option. But one of the nice things about Forge is that you can add different features to the Forge console. Like I can add the Gradle plugin add-on, for example, and then I can use Gradle as my build system. But I'm going to leave that as Maven. I can also change the type, and the type can be either a war, a jar, whatever you want to output. And this will work for both Spring Boot and Java EE. So you can, for example, create a Spring Boot jar very, very easily as well. So I'm just going to create that new project called JBCN. What you'll notice here is the location I'm in has now changed from Forge Demos to JBCN. So if I type ls, you'll see that we've got a POM created and a regular source tree. So I'm going to go into Eclipse, and I'm just going to import this so we can see exactly what's going to be created. I'm going to port an existing Maven project because that's what it's providing. I'm going to go into Forge Demos, JBCN, and this is the POM that I want to import. And so from here, we can see in our Java resources, we have a project. It's a typical Maven project, so we have our source Java, we have our test Java. We also have a POM XML. If I open that POM XML up, there's not a huge amount there. We can see that we're actually going to be creating a war file. It's got a file name, not much else. So let's go ahead and actually create something. When I hit tab now, you'll notice there's a whole bunch more we can actually do. And the reason is because now we're inside a project, we can actually create artifacts. So for example, I can create some JPA if I wanted to. So let's create a new entity. If I hit tab, we can see what options we want. So I'm going to name it. Let's name it monkey, given that I just mentioned the monkey example. We can do other things here if we want, including table name. I can select a JPA provider if you want, and you can choose whichever provider you want, depending on what you're going to deploy it on. In this case, the default is Hibernate. I can also set my JPA version if you wanted to, depending on which version, obviously, of the entity you wanted to create, and so forth. But here I'm just going to literally just create a new entity called monkey, and you'll notice I'm now in monkey.java. That should have been a capital M, sorry. Now we're in a monkey.java, this is actually the location we are. So you can see that's the location we are in the directory. So if I type in ls, what you'll actually see is the definition of the class. So you can see we've got some fields there, we have some methods there, and if I go back into my runtime here and refresh, you can see we have a new monkey.java there. I'm going to rename this to, actually let's come out of here. This to capital M, so it's going to bug me. Oh, what happened? This is why some people say you should never use Eclipse. Oh yeah, because it's, yeah, I see. Monkey. There we go. Of course, we clean the project because that's what Eclipse likes. Okay, so now we have monkey. If I here we have monkey. I can cd into monkey.java, and weirdly that allows me to do that. So we have our monkey.java there. The next thing I'm going to do is actually create a field on that. So if I type JPA, JPA new field, here we can create a new field. I'm going to call it, I don't know, bananas. What else? We can add a type in. We can add a type in there. So you can say I want this to be an int, let's say. You can have it as transient. You can assign it a column name if you want. Bands. And we have our field created. So now if I type ls, you can see we have our new bananas field, and we have a getter and a setter. If I go into Eclipse, we can see that our bananas field is here. It's mapping it to the column name bands. You can also see that on the equals, we have some intelligence in the equals, and also on the toString, and we actually output exactly what the class is. So there's a little bit of interesting stuff there. Also, if I go into my resources, you'll also see a persistence XML there as well. So effectively, we're creating a whole bunch of the artifacts that you need in order for you to use JPA. Let's also add some bean validation as well. So what I'm going to do now is is it constraint add or add constraint? I think it's constraint. Yeah, constraint add. So now what you can do is you can add constraints on the fields that you choose. So let's say on property, which property we're going to use? Let's say bananas. Let's say the constraint is going to be maybe max, and let's say value. So let's say a monkey should never eat more than 100 bananas. The constraint is already there. You obviously don't see anything in there, but if we was to go back to the monkey class, we now see the value there for the max of, which is effectively going to add that bean validation. No idea why that's not compiling. Weirdness. Okay, so we can now effectively create our application just based on running some console commands. What we can also do is, if we wanted to, we can chain these commands together in a script and then run this script automatically from the command line. One other thing I can do is I can very easily build. And what we're doing here is we're just using Maven, but rather than actually type the Maven command because we're being abstracted slightly by JBoss Forge, we actually just invoke JBoss Forge, which will automatically invoke the build tool of choice. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to actually set up a server. I have a server here actually, which is just Wildfly 10. But what I want to do is I want to set it up from within JBoss Forge. So effectively point JBoss Forge to this location. So I'm going to set it up as a Wildfly server. My version is going to be, what is it? It's going to be 10.1.0.final. I also need to state where the location is, so install directory, and install directory is going to be not monkey.java. The install directory is going to be, no, not monkey.java, it's going to be /user /Simon Maple /ZT/wildfly final. So we hit return there. Hopefully that's going to come back pretty quick. Good, it has. The next thing we need to do is simply AS start, and this is gonna start up the Wildfly instance. So we should hopefully be able to see here. This is going to start any second. For some reason it's not. Oh. Okay. So it has started. We can just simply do now an AS deploy, which is going to drop our application straight onto that. Actually, I've forgotten one thing: AS undeploy. Because one thing we haven't done is we haven't actually added any scaffolding. We've got our entity, but what are we actually going to test? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scaffold the entity, and when we scaffold, we can choose how we want to scaffold this. So I'm going to choose that my provider is either AngularJS or Faces. You can add other providers again as add-ons. In this case, why don't we just use Faces because we're using the full Java EE. I'm going to add a target, and my target is going to be my entity. And I think that's probably everything I'm really interested in doing. Actually, before I do that, the other thing I'm also going to do is we all love REST, right? Seems to be the cool, funky thing that everyone does. What I'm going to do is I'm going to generate some endpoints from my entities. So we can effectively create a mini REST application based on the entities that we've already created. So I think that's probably all I actually need to do. As soon as we do that, if I go back to my runtime here, you can see, there we go, we have the REST application at application path REST, obviously, and we have our monkeys endpoint there. Straight after that, I'm going to scaffold, as I discussed earlier, and I'm going to use, Faces, add my targets, and we can scaffold that. So now what we have here is we have our view, which has effectively all our usual kind of Faces stuff. The other thing which has been generated, I can show you here, is actually the validation XML. So this is our bean validation, which we added when we added the constraint. So we're getting an application kind of built here. I can now build this. Then I'll do an AS deploy. Okay, that's now dropped into my runtime. So if I go to local host /JBCN, here we go. So I've literally created an application which we can now view, deployed it onto Wildfly, and I haven't written a single line of code. We have our entity. Here I can click on monkeys. I can add a number of bananas. So I can't remember how many we had as our max. I think it was 100, wasn't it? If I had 200, we get our error, must be less than or equal to 100. So let's make that 50. Hit save, and we can add these entities to our, we can add these instances as easy as we want. Also, if I wanted to, I could actually use rest, right, it's monkeys, and we can see the instances we want there. I can pick a specific instance out just using an ID. So we can do all of this without writing a single line of code because it's been automatically generated for us using JBoss Forge. The next thing I want to do is let's undeploy that. So where are we going here? So let's go AS undeploy. The next thing I want to do is actually show you something called our Killian. Who's heard of our Killian before? Okay, a few people. Our Killian allows you to write more integration-style testing, but it allows you to do it in more of a unit test kind of style. So I can create our Killian tests in a unit test style. That can then push the test code to a container, run that test code, and you can do it in a very managed way so that our Killian can actually manage the container for you, or you can do it in a remote way, which we're going to be showing, which allows you to hold the container yourself, and you can push code to it. So let's do that. I've already got the Killian environment set up in my or should I say the add-on installed in JBoss Forge. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add we're going to set up our Killian for this project. The test framework we're going to be using is JUnit, and I think that's pretty much everything. That's of course right. I need to explain to our Killian which container I'm using. So in this case, we're going to be using Wildfly. We're going to be using Wildfly Remote because I'm going to be managing the server myself. We also need to say which container version we're going to be using, and that's going to be 10.1.0.final, and that's probably all I need to give it today. Yeah, that's probably fine. So I create that. The next thing I need to do is just create an actual Killian test. So we can run our Killian create test. In this test, I can say, well, let's enable JPA. Let's pass over some targets. The target I want to actually test, let's say, is the view monkey bean, and that's pretty much it. I don't think I'm going to want to add anything else there. So we've added our test now. So if I come over here and I refresh this, we have our monkey bean test here. So it's actually, if we actually look at what our Killian can do, we have a deployment annotation, and that effectively means that you're going to create the archive that you're going to deploy onto your real environment. So here we're adding a class monkey bean. I'm also going to add the monkey entity as well. What else are we doing? We can use injection because we're obviously deploying this into a container, so we don't need to mock up anything necessarily. And we can then add as many methods as we wanted to with the test annotation. And here you can see with this test annotation, all we're doing is we're just checking that this injection works. That's pretty much everything I needed to do. So the next thing I want to do is actually, the other thing I wanted to show you is in my POM, we have a changed POM, and in the POM we have this new profile. Where is it? We have this new profile called our Killian Wildfly Remote. And now what I can do is, if I grab that, I can build, and I think it's -p:\that. And what this is going to do is this is going to build my application. Then it's going to actually execute the profile, which is the Killian test, and that's then going to deploy across. In fact, as we see here, it's going to run this test. It's deploying it across, and as we can see, that was successful. So we've run our test. We've deployed the test war, and you effectively run it just like a unit test, right? We see the results just as a unit test. So we can very, very easily add our Killian testing into our build, which is going to deploy automatically to our container. Okay, I want to show you one more thing before we move on to some Spring Boot stuff. Actually, let me show you one other thing very, very quickly before we go on to this one other thing. And this is in the AAS Setup. If I wanted to, in fact, let's find the AAS Setup again. AAS Setup here. If I wanted to add something like a JVM parameter, if I wanted to actually make changes to the server, I can add a JVM args. I can add something like minus Java agent / users / Simon Maple / ZT. No, not ZT / is it ZT? Let's see. Yes, it is. /ZT /xrebel /xrebel.jar. And what this is going to do, this is okay, that's weird. Let's see if that even worked. So one thing you can do in for demos in JBCN, if I was to come here and see into JBCN, we have a forge settings. And if you was to just simply cap forge settings, you'll see everything that's been added. And in fact, the JVM arg has indeed been added, so that when we start and stop, and let's do that now. AS shutdown. And AS start. Now we're actually running. Now we actually attach this JRebel agent. We're going to be adding some profiling on that, and I'll show you that working as we go. Let me just check the application gets deployed as well. Okay, it hasn't been deployed, so we're going to do an AS deploy, get our application on there as well. And now when I come over to JBCN, don't fight me now, come on, there we go. Now when we go to JBCN, if I was to actually click around and actually do something like create new 50 or something like that, and hit save, what we're actually getting now is this JRebel bar up here, and JRebel allows you to do a number of things. It's effectively a profiler, but at development time. So it automatically injects itself into your web request, and here we can see exactly what's happening under the covers, not just in terms of the amount of I/O which gets pushed across to your databases, for example. So in fact here we have some Hibernate, and this Hibernate is, as we'd expect, inserting 50 bananas with an ID of 1 into the monkey table. Here we have a select where we're actually grabbing all the information back with a limit of 10. We can guess that all that's going to do is provide the information here. So not only can you see what is happening under the covers, you can actually see the Hibernate or the JPA or whatever you're using actually nicely formatted. You can also see application profiling, so we can see where we're spending our time in our request, which is very, 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 very nice. So we can see a lot of our time is being spent in this lookup. 10% is actually being spent in the handle request method itself. And there's also a post here as well. So it allows you as a developer to very, very easily see where you're spending your time, what interactions you're having, not just with downstream services, but also with databases and things like that as well. Okay, let's create another project. So let's go way, 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 way out to about there. I'm going to create a new project, and our project is going to be called Wildfly, or Swarm Demo, let's call it. Swarm Demo. In our new Swarm Demo, let's just create a REST endpoint. REST new endpoint. Here we can call endpoint, I don't know, JBCN rocks. Let's add a method. The method is going to be a get. I think that's pretty much all we need to do. So we have an application with an endpoint, it's got to do get. Let's actually just import it so we can actually see what's happening under the covers. So let's import existing Maven project. And Swarm demo, finish. There's our Swarm demo. It has the usual Maven stuff. We have a REST application, JBCN rocks. That's our path. Let's say yes, particularly the boat trip. If you don't know what the boat trip was, you need to be a speaker next year. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build that. In fact, I'm actually going to build package. And when we build package, what that's actually going to do is if I go to another console and I go to what did I call it? Swarm demo. What we're actually going to get in our target is it didn't do it. Oh, I know why. What we actually need to do is actually config Swarm into this POM, into this project. So I need to, what's it called? It's called, is it Wildfly Swarm Setup? There we go. Actually, I hit tab. There's not actually that much you actually need to do. All the Wildfly Swarm Setup is really going to do is if I come back here and open my POM, all it's actually going to do is add this dependency here, pretty much, which is going to effectively say this is going to build itself as a Swarm jar. So now when I build package, what we're going to get as an output, in fact, there we go, what we're actually going to get as an output now is this big jar. So we've got a fat jar here. It's actually pretty big. But this is going to contain enough of Wildfly so that it can run manually. So if I java -jar swarm demo-swarm.jar, this is, in fact, what we're actually doing here is it's actually installing fractions. So the way JBoss works is it uses JBoss modules under the covers, which allows you to kind of plug and play with whichever fractions or whichever components you want to use. So we're not actually running with the full JBoss Wildfly instance. We're just using the fractions we need. So we're ready. I just need to go to, oops. What did I call it? Was it just Swarm demo? No. JBCN rocks. Yes, JBCN did rock, particularly the boat trip. So you can very easily create an application, spin up an application using JBoss Wildfly Swarm with just what you need, and easily create an application. And again, I created that pretty much with no additional coding. Okay, so let's stop that. Let's come over here and come out of this. And into JBCN. I just want to make sure I did shut that down as well. That stopped as well. Okay, let's finish with that. And one thing I will mention as well is you can do everything pretty much that I've just shown with Spring Boot as well. And I believe that functionality is coming into JBoss Forge out the box. Before, I think I had to install the what was it? Fabricate add-on in order to actually get the Spring Boot functionality. But let's take a look at Spring Boot. Now, if we actually take a look at Spring Boot, who's used Spring Boot before? Wow, a whole bunch of people. So Spring Boot takes an opinionated view on building production-ready Spring applications and favors convention over configuration. Convention over configuration, yeah. So we'll look at those three points in a little bit more detail later. But for those of you who haven't used Spring Boot or seen start.spring.io, it's a website that will effectively allow you to create your Spring Boot application very rapidly and allow you to have a downloadable artifact that you can then run instantly. So here we can choose whether we want to create a Maven or a Gradle project with whichever language we want. and which version of Spring Boot we want to use as well. We can add, we can change whichever, whatever we want to call our artifact or our group. We can choose which dependencies we want. So here we're going to let's create a few of these. Let's go for what it suggests: web security, JPA, actuator. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Actuator. Actuator is what provides you with the production-ready facilities, which we saw on their website there. Let's add some a database as well. And if you wanted to, you can switch to the full version, which will provide you a full list of everything you could add into your Spring Boot application. So there's a huge amount of there, including if you're interested in doing microservices or anything like that. There's a whole bunch of really useful add-ons that you can add. Okay, so let's download this. We're going to generate the project. If I open this, we can see here we go, demo 2. I've obviously done this as a test on my laptop. We have our POM, we have our source. Let's add this into. In fact, let's delete this. Let's add this new demo into Eclipse. Downloads, but it wasn't demo. It was demo 2. Oh, Eclipse. Finish now. Go away, Eclipse. There we go. Right, so let's clear all that. Let's go and see our demo application here. And in our demo application, we have a couple of things. So we have our Spring Boot application. This is the annotation so that the Spring framework knows this is going to be a Spring Boot application. This is actually an annotation which represents a few other annotations. We also have our main method, which actually creates the environment for which Spring Boot it bootstraps. This is going to be running a Tomcat embedded application. What else am I going to show you? There's also some interesting test. Well, I say interesting; it's not that interesting, but some testing you can add there as well. In the POM, what we're actually doing is we have these starters. And these starters are effectively a whole bunch of dependencies based on what you stated you wanted to use in your start.spring.io configuration. You can add or remove them, of course, as you wish. But if I wanted to actually add something, so let's create a public string hello, or let's say hola, because we're in Spain, and here we're going to just return. Have I spelled hola correctly? JBCN. And let's do a couple of things. We're going to make this a REST controller. And we're also going to add this as a request mapping, and then here we're just going to have that as hola. Okay, so we save everything, and all we're going to do now is just run this. And what you're going to see is, oh, okay, that's interesting. I've actually added JRebel to the previous previous project called demo, so it's actually running JRebel as well. I'll show you that as a demonstration as well. But what we're now running is we're running Spring. You can tell it's Spring because we have some amazing ASCII art, as my friend Josh Long always says. And this Spring demo is very straightforward. Actually, because I added security, I'm going to need this. And now if I go to my runtime, I'm going to go local host / hola, wasn't it? User password, and we get hola JBCN. So again, very quickly, it bootstraps everything for you. It does configuration over convention. No, it does convention over configuration, which basically means I haven't actually had to set anything up, and we've got our Tomcat server embedded. We've got our application there. I've just created a REST endpoint very quickly. One of the other things we are able to do, for example, is, I think it's actually mappings. Let's have a look if that's correct. It is. Because we added this actuator, what we have is the production-ready style information. So, for example, these are all the endpoints I can choose. So I can actually look at. So I can go localhost /n, for example, and it gives me information about the running environment I've got. But it's production-ready, which means that I can get things like metrics. And if I click on metrics, we can see a whole bunch of information about how the application is running. For example, memory, how much memory is free, that kind of stuff. So also counters. So you can see, for example, the counter for Ola has been invoked once. If I was to go and invoke that a couple more, oh, that wasn't the right one, was it? Ola. Invoke that a couple more times. There we go. And then refresh this, you can see Ola has now been invoked 4 times. So you can see what's happening behind the scenes, and this is what they mean by Spring Boot being production ready. Let's say I now wanted to make a change to something here. Let's show you some JRebel in action. So even with Spring Boot, which is much, much faster to develop with compared to, say, the usual Spring platform where you might be running it on a larger application server, you might have redeploy times of minutes. Even with Spring Boot, it can be a pain in the ass to develop, then have to wait, and then see your code actually running. But what we're going to do, because we're using JRebel, we're able to make changes to our code and actually then just hit refresh and see those code changes instantly. So if I wanted to say, let's say we'll have a string name here. What I'm going to do is say name there, and I'm going to make this a path variable. And here I'm going to have Ola name. I'm going to add that, hit save. We've made a very simple change there so that what we're going to do is we're going to be pulling the name after that / into this parameter, and then we're going to be using that to say Ola. So if I come back here, and where are we here? If I now say Ola, well, let's not do JBCN, let's say Ola Simon. Let's do hello, is it me you're looking for? Indeed, I can see it in your eyes. I can see it in the browser. It is indeed me you're looking for. So we've made that change. We've made that change. We haven't had to redeploy. We haven't had to do anything to the server. The code and the resources within the server get automatically pulled in from the built classes, just the changes that have been updated. And then from that, the runtime, the JRebel enabled runtime, reloads that, reconfigures, reinitializes so that you will effectively get the updated code without needing to do all the lengthy redeploys. What it also does is it maintains state. So for example, what you'll notice is I didn't need to relog in because we're using security. I didn't need to log in to see that result as well. So we maintain the state of all the objects, we maintain the session, and you effectively just get the new information. I think that's everything that I'm going to show you, so that was fun. And we're going to jump straight into questions. So I think, how long have we got left? There we go. How long have we got left? Have we got time for a couple of questions? Any questions? We have one up here.
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much for demoing JBoss Forge. So I was wondering, how does this compare to, for example, a framework like JHipster, which tries more or less to do the same thing, but then in a Spring Boot context?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, JHipster is very, very similar. I mean, JHipster effectively is just a bootstrap for Spring Boot almost. It was, I think if you're going to look at using a specific technology like Spring Boot, I think JHipster is actually a very, very good option Right now, the way the feature work is coming in, Spring Boot is still very much a kind of second citizen to all the feature work that's going into to JBoss Forge. So if you're gonna use Spring Boot for sure, I would, of the two, I would pick JHipster probably to in fact absolutely I would pick JHipster to do that, yeah. So yeah, JBoss Forge is great from the point of view of it being very generic. So anyone can create an add-on. I mean, if I go to JBoss Forge add-on, you can see the add-ons that, and you can actually, everything here is open source. Obviously, it's Red Hat, but you can add add-ons. So, for example, there's a Confluence add-on, interestingly. Jira add-on, again, interestingly. There's a whole bunch of different add-ons that you can contribute or use. So the ones that I've used here, I used Killian, I used AAS, where is it? I think I used AAS Server, I think it was called. Or was it just Wildfly? Wildfly AS, there we go, and I used Wildfly Swarm as well. So from a generic point of view, JBoss Forge is very good. If you're going to go specific, yeah, JHipster. Any other questions?
Yes, one question from here. Don't you think that with so many automatisms, you lose a little bit the control over the application?
With so many what, sorry?
Automatisms.
I see. Yeah, I mean, it depends. One thing that JBoss Forge is very, very good for is if you wanted to create an application or a number of applications with just a few tweaks. So, for example, let's say I scaffolded there with faces, and I wanted to actually just change it and say I want to do it with Angular. Rather than having to create everything manually again, you can just run one massive script, and that could be a far more complex application. Just run it with one script, change one bit in the script, run it again, and you've got your full application very, very quickly. So when you run things in an automated way, yeah, you always lose the kind of manual feeling. So, but you have to pick and choose what you want to automate. Automation's great for actually just doing the kind of dull, boring tasks. But if it's something that's important to you to understand, then yeah, maybe doing it manually is better. But I think in my experience automating things, as long as people are understanding what they're actually doing, it's by far better. Also, you can use JBoss Forge for new startup applications. If you have an existing application and you just CD into that directory, you can still use JBoss Forge in existing applications to create JPA entities or whatever you wanted as well. It's not just for rapid startup, although that's mainly what it's used for. Okay, so thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed that. If you didn't and you feel like your 60 minutes have been wasted, please go to JRebel.com and you'll get your time back very, very quickly. Thank you very much.